It began on what should have been an ordinary afternoon. Sunlight filtering through tall Georgia pines, the air humming with the familiar sounds of bird song and the breeze rustling soft green leaves. 8-year-old Maya was spending the weekend with her grandmother, a warm woman with gentle hands and a kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon. Maya had been told not to wander far, to stay within sight of the yellow-painted farmhouse where love lived in every creaky floorboard. But children, as we know, don't always obey boundaries when wonder calls to them. That day, it wasn't trouble that beckoned. It was beauty. A butterfly, delicate and bright, flickered past her nose like a dancing flame in the wind. Blue and yellow wings glinting in the light, almost glowing. It didn't flit away like most butterflies. It hovered. It waited. Then it drifted forward, slow enough for her to follow. So she did. Step by step, deeper into the woods, farther than Grandma would have allowed, Maya followed the butterfly into the unknown. The forest around her thickened with every step. Sunlight filtered down in broken beams now, as if the trees were whispering secrets too old for children to understand. But Maya was not afraid. Not yet. She was focused, her small pink sneakers crunching softly on dried leaves, her ponytail bouncing as she ducked under low branches. She wasn't looking for anything but the butterfly. And then, she heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Faint at first, like wind catching a cry from very far away. But then it came again. A baby, crying, alone. The kind of sound that cuts through curiosity and goes straight to the chest. Maya froze. "Hello?" she called, her voice thin in the vastness of the trees. No reply. The cry came again, closer now, more desperate. Maya didn't hesitate. She moved through the underbrush, her child's heart pounding, her small hands pushing aside leaves bigger than her face. And then she saw him. He was tiny, no bigger than a watermelon, lying half-covered by damp leaves nestled between two tree roots, like nature herself had tried to cradle him. A baby boy, wrapped in a pale blue blanket, his skin pink and cold to the touch. He couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. His face was scrunched in hunger and fear, his fists waving in protest at a world that had somehow abandoned him. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Her knees hit the dirt beside him. "It's okay, little baby," she whispered, the way her grandmother had whispered to her when she was scared. She touched his cheek gently, as if afraid he might disappear. The crying softened at her voice. And for a moment, they simply looked at each other. Two souls who weren't supposed to find each other, but did. Maya glanced around. Surely someone must be nearby. A parent, a stroller, a sign that this was all some kind of mistake. But the woods held no answers, only silence. The baby's face began to twist again, his cries threatening to return. Maya panicked for a heartbeat. She had no phone, no one around, no idea what to do. But then she remembered Grandma's words. "In an emergency, find an adult. Don't leave someone who needs you." That was all Maya needed to remember. With hands that trembled but didn't fail her, she reached down, sliding one arm beneath the baby's back, the other cradling his head the way Grandma had shown her last Christmas when she got to hold her baby cousin. He was heavier than she expected, but she held on tight, pulling him close to her chest. "I'm taking you to my grandma," she whispered. "She knows what to do about everything." The way back felt longer, each step cautious and slow. She walked with the strange awareness that the world had changed and she was now carrying a part of it. The baby was warm against her. He stared up with impossibly blue eyes and calm as if he trusted her completely. Maya didn't understand how he had gotten there, why no one else had come, or what terrible thing must have happened. She only knew that she couldn't leave him. Every step she took back toward the edge of the forest was a quiet act of courage. She crossed the line between innocence and responsibility before she even realized what it meant. When the trees finally parted and the little yellow house came into view, relief washed over her like sunlight. She carried the baby across the yard, up the porch steps, and into the house that smelled like cinnamon and safety. "Grandma," she called, "come quick, found a baby." And everything changed. Inside the warm kitchen that had always been a sanctuary of safety and sweetness, the world suddenly tilted into something unrecognizable. Maya stood in the doorway, her arms wrapped tightly around the infant she'd just carried out of the forest. Her chest heaved, not from the weight of the child, but from the gravity of what had just happened. Her voice, still breathless, trembled in the still air. "Grandma, I found a baby in the woods." Her grandmother, Miss Johnson, turned, dish towel in hand, the smile on her face falling away as her gaze locked onto the child nestled against Maya's chest. "Lord have mercy," she whispered, rushing forward, her hands reaching instinctively to take the infant. But before either of them could ask the questions burning in their minds, who, why, how, there came a sound that would etch this day into memory forever. A siren. One siren, then another, followed by the sharp flashes of red and blue lights slicing through the peaceful light of late afternoon. The flashing colors bathed the walls and windows of the little house, casting long streaks across the living room. It was as if the outside world had caught fire with urgency. Maya clutched the baby tighter. "Why are the police here?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Did they already know? Her grandmother's face darkened as she peeked through the curtains. 3 police cruisers had pulled up in front of their home, officers stepping out with the tense alertness of people trained to face danger. The knock on the front door wasn't gentle. It was a demand. "Police, open up!" Miss Johnson took a breath, adjusted the baby in her arms, and turned the knob. Maya stood a few paces behind her heart pounding, her hands clenched at her sides. 2 officers stood on the porch, hands near their holsters, eyes sharp and scanning. A third, female, calmer but no less intense, stood behind them. "We received an Amber Alert," the tallest officer said. His gaze landed on the baby in Grandma's arms. "We need to ask you some questions." Inside, the officers filled the living room with the weight of authority and concern. Their boots echoed on the hardwood floors. The female officer spoke into her radio. "We've located an infant matching the description." Miss Johnson explained what had happened, that Maya had found the baby in the woods behind their property. When Maya was asked to recount her story, she stepped forward slowly, her small hands twisting the fabric of her shirt as she spoke. "I was chasing a butterfly," she said, her voice quiet but clear, "and I heard crying. He was lying there all alone." One of the officers knelt to her level, offering a gentle nod. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Maya Johnson." "I'm Officer Lillian. Can you show us where you found the baby?" Maya nodded, though the idea of returning to that part of the woods made her stomach twist. "We can go together," Officer Lillian said kindly. "We won't go far, just enough to understand." But first, the infant needed to be checked. As if on cue, more sirens cried out in the distance. This time an ambulance. Paramedics rushed into the house with practiced speed. One of them, a woman with curly red hair and kind eyes, gently took the baby and began assessing him right there on Grandma's couch. "He's a little dehydrated, but otherwise seems okay," she said with a small smile directed at Maya. "You probably saved his life, finding him before nightfall." But Maya didn't feel like a hero, not when every adult in the room looked so serious. Not when the officers kept exchanging glances that felt heavy with unspoken concerns. Then came the news that shifted the room again. "This baby," one officer said, flipping through his notebook. "His name is Jacob Miller, 6 weeks old, taken from his home earlier this afternoon. His parents reported a break-in. Someone entered the house and removed him from his crib." Grandma gasped audibly, pressing a hand to her chest. Dear God, who would do something like that? But Maya noticed something else. The officer's eyes had turned back toward her. Their stares weren't cold, but they weren't easy either. She had found the baby, yes, but the situation was now bigger than her, bigger than any child should have to face. The seriousness grew deeper when the group, Maya, Grandma, and the officers, walked back toward the woods. The sun was starting to dip low in the sky, and the shadows stretched longer across the ground. Maya held a flashlight in her hand, Officer Lillian at her side. She led them carefully, pointing to the exact thicket where she had found the baby, between 2 tree roots that curled like fingers out of the soil. An officer scanned the area and called out, "There's a disturbed patch here, and something else." Maya watched as he carefully picked something up with gloved hands. Officer Lillian's expression changed when she saw it. It was a small pink hair bow. Maya's breath caught. "That looks like the kind my teacher wears," she said. "Miss Winters, Amber Winters. She teaches 3rd grade." The name sparked a quiet storm. The officers exchanged urgent glances. Radios buzzed. The search perimeter expanded. Maya, standing at the edge of the forest, felt the ground shift again beneath her feet. She had only tried to help. She had only followed a butterfly. But her simple, brave decision had just cracked open something far bigger. A mystery that stretched beyond her neighborhood, her school, even her understanding. A baby had been taken. Her teacher's name was now part of an investigation, and all of it had started with the kindness of a child who refused to look away. They say the smallest details can unravel the biggest secrets. In Maya's case, it was something as simple, as innocent, as ordinary as a pink hair bow. A tiny object caught on a bush, just barely visible in the dimming light of the woods, soft, frayed at the edges, and instantly recognizable. As the police and her grandmother stayed focused on the area where baby Jacob had been found, Maya's eyes wandered. She wasn't looking for anything specific, only trying to remember the exact way she had come, her flashlight beam tracing the trail as dusk crept in around them. That's when she saw it, something fluttering slightly in the breeze, snagged on a low-hanging branch. She stepped toward it instinctively. "Maya, don't touch anything," her grandmother called, but it was too late. In her hand was the bow, delicate, dusty, and unmistakable. Maya's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just any bow. It was the kind her teacher, Miss Winters, wore almost every day. Maya had always liked how Miss Winters changed them to match the season. Soft reds in fall, frosty silvers in December, pastels in spring. This one, though faded, looked like one Maya had seen just last week during story time. She remembered the way her teacher had adjusted it while reading aloud, doing silly voices for each character. Holding it now in the forest with police lights glowing faintly through the trees, it felt wrong, out of place, but also like a puzzle piece that had suddenly and terrifyingly clicked into place. Officer Lillian took the bow gently from Maya's hand and sealed it inside a small evidence bag. Her expression was calm, but her voice had a careful tension to it. "Do you recognize this?" she asked. Maya nodded. "It looks like the kind Miss Winters wears." "What's her full name?" "Amber Winters. She teaches 3rd grade at Pine Grove Elementary." The officers exchanged glances. Not casual ones, but those silent, weighty looks that pass between people who understand that a line has just been crossed, from uncertainty into suspicion. The walk back to the house felt colder than the one before. The forest, moments ago just mysterious, now felt threatening. Maya stayed close to her grandmother, trying to make sense of her own thoughts. Miss Winters? Sweet, gentle Miss Winters, who brought stickers and read books and funny voices and gave out extra snacks if you forgot your lunch? It didn't make sense. But something was wrong. That much was obvious from the moment they stepped back into the warmth of the kitchen. There were more officers now. Bright lights had been set up near the woods. Yellow crime scene tape flapped gently in the wind. Maya's once peaceful world was turning into something far more complicated. In the kitchen, a new man had joined the group, Detective Pearson. He was tall, serious, with tired eyes and a voice that didn't waste time. "We need to talk about what happened out there," he told Grandma quietly, but Maya could hear every word. She sat on the couch feeling small and strangely exposed. She had done the right thing, hadn't she? Then why did everything feel like it was getting worse? Officer Lillian sat beside her again, speaking in the same gentle tone as before. "Maya, do you remember seeing anyone else in the woods before you found the baby? Anyone at all?" Maya started to shake her head, then paused. A flicker of memory surfaced. I think I saw someone. Just barely. When I first heard the baby crying, I saw someone walking away. I couldn't see their face, just a coat. It was dark green, like the trees." Detective Pearson perked up. He stepped into the room, pulled out his phone, and showed Maya a picture. "Do you recognize this woman?" Maya gasped. It was Miss Winters, her teacher, smiling in front of the school. "That's her," she whispered. "That's Miss Winters." What followed was a blur of movement and decisions. Officers left the house quickly. Radios crackled. Words like warrant, interrogation, and school records passed between adults like fire. Maya heard her grandmother arguing quietly with Detective Pearson in the hallway. She didn't catch every word, but she understood the emotion. Shock, fear, protectiveness. Everything was moving so fast. Within the hour, Pine Grove Elementary was closed until further notice. Miss Winters had not been home when police arrived, but her car was gone and her apartment showed signs of a rushed departure. The school's principal was being questioned. Parents were calling one another in a frenzy of confusion. In the middle of it all, Maya sat silently, clutching a warm cup of cocoa her grandmother had made. Though she didn't take a single sip, her thoughts were tangled and heavy. She remembered how Miss Winters had been acting a little strange lately, quieter than usual, a bit distracted. 2 weeks ago, Maya had walked into the supply closet to get more construction paper and had found her teacher sitting on the floor, eyes red, sniffling. Allergies, she'd said quickly, but Maya had known it was more than that. She was crying. Now everything started to add up. The sadness, the secrecy, the bow, the green coat, a baby reported stolen, a hospital, a lie. Later that night, Maya lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She didn't want to believe her teacher could do something so terrible. But what if the baby had something to do with her? What if the reason Miss Winters looked so broken in the closet was because she had lost something or someone? A question kept echoing in her mind, one that wouldn't go away. What if Miss Winters wasn't just a suspect? What if she was the baby's real mother? It was a wild thought, maybe even a wrong one. But it was there now, threading its way through every memory, every look, every moment. And it all started with a pink hair bow caught on a bush, waiting to be found. The name Amber Winters no longer echoed in Maya's mind as that of a beloved teacher. It now rang with confusion, heartbreak, and an unsettling sense of betrayal. Miss Winters, who had once been the warmest presence in the classroom, had vanished. Not just absent, but deliberately gone. Her apartment empty, her voicemail full, her once reliable car missing. To Maya, it didn't feel real. This was the same woman who read Charlotte's Web with a voice for every character, who wore cheerful bows in her hair, who smiled even on tired Monday mornings. But now she was the center of an active police investigation. The pink bow in the forest hadn't just been a clue. It was a quiet unraveling of the story Maya thought she knew. The weight of that unraveling landed hard the next morning when Detective Pearson returned. Not with more questions, but with answers Maya hadn't been prepared to hear. Miss Winters had been arrested, caught trying to leave town, and under the pressure of questioning, she had confessed, not to kidnapping, not yet, but to being in the woods that day, to being near the place where baby Jacob had been found, to watching Maya walk into the trees and leaving just before the police arrived. She had placed herself at the scene, but the deeper shock came not from her presence in the forest, but from the past she had kept hidden. Miss Winters, it turned out, had given birth 6 weeks earlier, quietly, secretly, at the very same hospital where baby Jacob had been born. But according to hospital records, her baby had been stillborn, declared dead shortly after delivery. There was no funeral, no family notified. She had taken a leave from school, claiming she was caring for a sick aunt out of state. Now the truth began to emerge. She had been recovering from childbirth, grieving, alone. The revelation shook everyone who knew her. At Pine Grove Elementary, her coworkers were stunned. She never said a word, one teacher told detectives. She just came back, quieter maybe, but we all thought she was tired, not grieving a loss like that. But something didn't sit right. That same hospital had now come under suspicion for falsifying records and switching infants. And when DNA tests came back and showing that baby Jacob wasn't biologically related to the Millers, the couple who'd raised him since his first breath, it raised a question too painful to ignore. Was Jacob the baby Miss Winters had been told was dead? To Maya, the idea was both terrifying and sad. She remembered how Miss Winters had cried in the supply closet, how her smiles had seemed thinner lately. What if that pain hadn't been imagined? What if her baby hadn't died but had been taken? And what if, in her desperation to reclaim what she'd lost, she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross? Adults talked in low voices behind closed doors, but Maya could feel the gravity of every whisper. She wasn't just the girl who found the baby anymore. She was the girl who had unknowingly stepped into the middle of a truth so complicated, no one yet knew where right ended and wrong began. In the quiet moments between interviews and updates and counselor visits, Maya found herself staring at the woods more often, at the place where everything began. She thought about Miss Winters, about the way sadness can make people do things they never thought they would, about how losing a child, even for a moment, could make the strongest people come undone. She didn't know all the answers. But she knew one thing with certainty now: Miss Winters had been keeping a secret not out of malice, but out of grief. A grief so deep, it had changed the way she walked through the world. And sometimes, Maya thought, people don't hide secrets because they were evil. Sometimes they hide them because they were broken. What began as a simple act of kindness by his child had now uncovered something far more sinister than anyone expected. A hidden system built not just on negligence, but on deliberate betrayal. As detectives dug deeper into Amber Winters' past, and baby Jacob's DNA results excluded the Millers as his biological parents, attention turned to the only place both stories overlapped: Riverside Memorial Hospital. It was there 6 weeks ago that Amber Winters was told her newborn son had died. And it was there, the very same day, that Thomas and Elaine Miller were handed a healthy baby boy they believed to be their own. At first, it seemed like a tragic coincidence. But the deeper investigators went, the more chilling the truth became. It started with hospital records, files that didn't match, timestamps that contradicted one another, and gaps in chain of custody documentation for newborns. Then came the bank statements. One of the hospital's senior maternity nurses, Patricia Coleman, had received large deposits, tens of thousands of dollars, into a private account over the span of several years. Not tied to her salary, not from the hospital, quiet, untraceable transfers from anonymous sources. Detective Pearson's team cross-referenced birth records from the past decade and found at least 3 more cases with eerily similar patterns. Young or vulnerable mothers whose babies had reportedly died, and adoptive parents who, coincidentally, had ties to wealth or influence. And in every case, one name appeared in the nursing records: Coleman. It was no longer just a tragedy, it was a scheme. A coordinated operation that had preyed on grief-stricken mothers, selling their babies to hopeful families willing to look the other way, or in some cases, families who never even suspected the child in their arms had been taken illegally. The hospital administration, when questioned, claimed ignorance. But there were signs of a cover-up: documents missing, personnel mysteriously reassigned, and a disturbing silence that ran deep. For Maya, who sat on the porch each evening watching butterflies pass through the garden, the weight of what she had uncovered grew heavier. She didn't have the words for it, but she could feel the shift in her world. Adults who were supposed to protect people had done something awful. A place that was meant to be safe, a hospital, had become the epicenter of something criminal. And Miss Winters, her teacher, had been one of the victims. What haunted Maya most wasn't just the lie, it was how many people had to lie to keep it going. Nurses, doctors, administrators, perhaps even lawyers. All of them had helped maintain the illusion that these babies were dead, or that these adoptions were legitimate. And all the while, real mothers, like Miss Winters, were walking through life believing their children were gone forever. Patricia Coleman, now under arrest, had refused to speak at first, but eventually, faced with overwhelming evidence, she cracked. She confessed not only to helping orchestrate the swap that separated Miss Winters and Jacob, but to facilitating similar adoptions for money, often under pressure from hospital insiders who promised her protection in return. Her actions, she claimed, had started with good intentions, helping families who couldn't conceive. But over time, the money blurred the lines, and the lies got easier. To the adults around her, this was a case of corruption and crime. To Maya, it was about something deeper. It was about what happens when people forget that babies aren't commodities. They aren't blank slates or empty vessels. They're human lives bound by invisible threads to the mothers who brought them into the world. And when those threads are cut by greed, it leaves wounds that don't heal easily. The story was no longer just about one baby in the woods. It was about every baby who had been stolen, every mother who had been deceived, and every family that had been built on a foundation of lies. And it had taken a quiet girl with a soft heart and the courage to follow a butterfly to start tearing that foundation apart. In the quiet spaces between breaking news headlines and whispered police briefings, one truth loomed large and undeniable. Miss Winters was desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. The more investigators uncovered about the baby switching operation at Riverside Memorial, the clearer it became that Amber Winters had not only been a victim of unspeakable deception, She had also become its most volatile variable. She was grieving, yes, but she was also cornered. And when you back someone into a corner, especially someone who has already lost everything, they don't always act rationally. They run, they reach for what they still believe they can protect. And sometimes they make the impossible choice to disappear. That choice came to life one gray morning when the police discovered that Miss Winters had vanished from the secure holding unit at County Hospital. She had not broken out violently or used force. Instead, she had used something far more dangerous: help. During what was meant to be a supervised wellness visit, a nurse, later identified as Patricia Coleman, had arrived dressed similarly to Miss Winters. Both were of similar height, similar build, and with a wig matching Miss Winters' blonde hair, the two had managed to swap places undetected. By the time the morning shift noticed something was wrong, Patricia was handcuffed to the hospital bed, and Amber was gone. The news hit the department like a fire alarm. Detective Pearson was at Maya's doorstep before sunrise, his eyes bloodshot and jaw tight with frustration. "She's gone," he said plainly, "and she might be headed here." It was a possibility that chilled Maya's grandmother to the bone. Miss Winters had spoken often about Maya during her interviews, how she'd recognized her in the woods, how she believed the little girl had been meant to find Jacob. It was clear she felt some kind of connection to the child who unknowingly uncovered her truth. That connection, while born of gratitude, now carried the weight of instability. If Miss Winters tried to make contact again, it could mean danger. Not because she was evil, but because she was unraveling. That same morning, the unthinkable happened. Jacob disappeared again. Just hours before he was to be transferred to Child Protective Services, the hospital social worker assigned to escort him was found unconscious in a supply closet. Her radio had been disabled. Her keys were missing, and the crib that held the baby boy, who was now at the center of a statewide investigation, was empty. The pieces fell into place fast. Surveillance footage showed Patricia Coleman entering through a staff-only side entrance. Amber Winters appeared 10 minutes later, disguised in hospital scrubs. Together, they had pulled off something precise, coordinated, and devastating. The assumption was clear. They had taken Jacob, and this time they weren't coming back. Panic bloomed across the community. Officers canvassed neighborhoods, checked bus and train stations, notified airports. But it was Maya again who brought the first lead. During a follow-up walk with search dogs near the edge of the woods where she had first found Jacob, Maya noticed something she hadn't seen before: a nearly invisible trail veering off the main path, leading toward a clearing deep in the forest. There, hidden beneath vines and weather-worn siding, was a small cabin, abandoned but recently used. Inside were signs of habitation: food, baby supplies, a worn blanket, and something else. Evidence that both Amber Winters and Patricia Coleman had been there. For Maya, it was a strange collision of emotions. The teacher she had once adored had become someone she couldn't quite understand. Not cruel, not violent, but unreachable in her grief. She had seen the baby. She had held him with steady hands. She hadn't run out of selfishness. She had run because she was terrified of losing him again. It wasn't right, but it was deeply, achingly human. And yet, it didn't stop there. As officers regrouped at the site, Jacob was still nowhere to be found. Just as everyone prepared to pull back, Maya saw it. Again. The butterfly. Blue and yellow. The same one she had followed into the forest the first time. It hovered, then fluttered toward the trees. She ran after it, ignoring shouts behind her, the voice of her grandmother pleading for her to stop. The trees gave way to another clearing, and there she was. Miss Winters, sitting on a fallen log, holding Jacob in her arms. Their eyes met, and in that moment, time paused. One girl, one woman, one baby who never should have been lost, and a choice that had to be made. In the hush of that hidden forest clearing, time stood still. Maya's breath caught as her eyes locked with Miss Winters, whose arms were wrapped protectively around baby Jacob. The teacher's hair was tangled with leaves, her clothes smeared with forest dirt, but her grip on the child was unwavering, gentle, maternal, fierce. For a brief moment, Maya saw not a fugitive or a criminal, but a woman in pain, trying to hold on to the only thing that still made sense to her: her son. Behind Maya, the voices of police and her grandmother grew louder, closer, tearing through the trees like the tension now gripping the space between the two of them. "They're coming," Maya whispered, her heart pounding. "You have to give him back." Miss Winters stood slowly, cradling Jacob tighter. Her voice cracked but remained soft. "I can't let them take him again, Maya. I lost him once. I believed he was dead. And when I found him again, breathing, alive, in someone else's arms. How do you just walk away from that?" Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I didn't plan to take him. I swear to you, I just wanted to see him. But the moment I held him, something inside me broke." Maya didn't speak. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her small frame, making her older than her years. She didn't understand the laws, the courts, the adult rules about custody and crime, but she understood pain, and she could see it etched into every line of her teacher's face. Miss Winters took a cautious step back. "I know what I did was wrong, but you have to understand. I'm not dangerous. I'm a mother. I was lied to, used. My baby was stolen. And the people who did it, they're still free." Her voice hardened just slightly. "The Millers didn't know. I don't blame them. But they were given my child by people who were paid to lie. And now I'm the one they're hunting?" The rustling behind Maya grew louder. Detective Pearson's voice boomed through the trees. "Maya, where are you?" She turned her head instinctively toward the sound, and in that instant, Miss Winters stepped further back, melting into the woods like a shadow with a heartbeat, but not before whispering, "Tell them I'm not a threat, just a mother who didn't know how to lose her son twice." When Maya made her decision, she turned toward the sound of the approaching officers. "I'm here," she called out. "She went that way." A moment later, the clearing erupted with movement. Officers, a barking K-9 unit, and her grandmother's worried arms sweeping Maya into an embrace. Miss Winters was gone again. But this time Maya understood something deeper. She hadn't just run to escape. She had run because she knew her time was up, and that her story finally had to be told. Later that day, Miss Winters was found and taken into custody without resistance. At the station, Maya was asked to speak with her one final time, this time in a supervised, quiet hospital room. Miss Winters, wrists softly restrained, no longer looked like a teacher or a fugitive. She looked like a mother who had faced every nightmare a parent could imagine, and she was ready to speak. With Maya present, Detective Pearson asked her to explain. And Miss Winters, voice low and steady, told everything: the secret pregnancy, the hospital birth, the devastating lie that her baby had died. She described how she had gone through grief alone, while hospital staff, including Patricia Coleman and a complicit doctor, arranged to give her son to the Millers in exchange for money. "They told me he never cried," she said, staring into the middle distance, "that he just slipped away. I didn't question it. I was too broken to fight." Her voice cracked. "But 2 weeks ago, I saw a woman in the mall holding a baby, and something in me just knew. It sounds crazy, but I knew. I followed her to her car. I saw the license plate. I looked her up, and when I realized she lived only 30 minutes away, I started watching." Miss Winters paused. "The day I saw Maya walk into those woods, I knew. It was fate. A child was going to save a child. The truth was out now. And though the law would determine the consequences, the weight of silence had been lifted. No more guessing, no more speculation, only the raw, painful truth of a woman misled, a system corrupted, and a baby finally returned to the light." In the days that followed Miss Winters' emotional confession, the world didn't return to normal, but something softer began to settle. The anger that once fueled headlines was slowly replaced by understanding. The outrage gave way to complexity, and the word kidnapper began to feel too blunt, too insufficient to describe a woman like Amber Winters. As investigators confirmed the full extent of the baby-switching conspiracy at Riverside Memorial Hospital, public perception shifted. Amber wasn't a villain. She was a mother. A grieving woman who had been lied to in the most devastating way possible, and who had broken the law only because the truth had been buried too deep for her to reach it any other way. And through it all, one person remained at the center of it: Maya, the brave 8-year-old girl whose heart had been strong enough to carry a stranger's baby through the woods, and whose instincts had helped bring a hidden truth to light. A week after her final meeting with Miss Winters, Maya sat with her grandmother on the front porch, the same porch where so much had begun. Spring had bloomed across the yard, and butterflies, real ones this time, drifted lazily from flower to flower. Maya watched them quietly, still thinking about Jacob, about the Millers, about her teacher, and about what it really meant to do the right thing when the right thing wasn't simple. The wind stirred a newspaper clipping on the porch table, baby switching ring uncovered at local hospital, and Maya read the words again for the 100th time. Patricia Coleman and Dr. Feldman, the delivery doctor, had both been arrested. 3 other mothers had come forward, suspecting that their stillborn declarations might have also been lies. The hospital was under federal investigation and changes were coming. But none of that could undo what had already happened. No justice could fully restore the weeks Amber Winters lost with her son. No consequence could erase the heartbreak the Millers now faced as they processed the knowledge that the baby they had loved as their own wasn't biologically theirs. But even amid the chaos, something beautiful had emerged: cooperation. In a remarkable act of grace, Amber had agreed not to fight the Millers for sole custody of Jacob, and the Millers in turn had admitted that the love they felt for Jacob had nothing to do with DNA. The judge, after reviewing the case, issued a temporary shared custody arrangement. Jacob would spend 4 days a week with the Millers and 3 days a week with Amber Winters, under supervised conditions until a more permanent solution could be determined. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was for now enough. Maya watched all of this unfold from the sidelines, but she never felt like a bystander. Detective Pearson continued to visit often, sometimes with updates, sometimes just to check on her well-being. One afternoon, he arrived with a small velvet bag. Inside was a gift, a delicate, hand-blown glass butterfly, its wings painted in soft hues of blue and yellow, just like the one that had led her into the woods. A reminder, he said, that one small act of courage can change everything. Maya placed it on the windowsill beside her bed, where it caught the light each morning and scattered tiny rainbows across her walls. School resumed, though it wasn't the same without Miss Winters. A substitute teacher filled the role with kindness, but to Maya, the classroom felt like it had lost some of its color. Her classmates treated her like a local hero, some in awe, some just curious. But Maya never bragged. She didn't tell stories. She didn't pretend to have answers. Because even now, there were parts of the story that didn't make sense to her. Not logically, but emotionally, she understood more than most adults ever could. She understood that family wasn't always about who gave birth to you. It was about who showed up when it mattered, who stayed when things got hard, who kept you safe when the world felt scary. And somehow, against all odds, Jacob had ended up with 2 families who would move heaven and earth to protect him. Maybe that made him one of the luckiest babies in the world. Maya hoped he would grow up knowing the truth, not just the facts in court documents, but the truth of how deeply he had been wanted, how fiercely he had been loved. One night, as Maya lay in bed, she asked her grandmother a question she'd been carrying for weeks. "Do you think Miss Winters is a bad person?" Her grandmother didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat on the edge of Maya's bed and stroked her hair gently. "I think Miss Winters is a person who made a lot of mistakes, but I also think she was hurt by people who should have protected her. And I think deep down she just wanted to be a mother. That doesn't make what she did right, but it does make it human." Maya nodded, accepting that not all things in life fit neatly into good and bad. Some truths were tangled. Some justice came with heartbreak. And sometimes helping someone didn't feel like victory. It just felt like doing the right thing, no matter how heavy it was. As another butterfly fluttered across the porch the next morning, Maya followed it with her eyes but didn't chase it. She didn't have to. This time, she knew exactly where she was meant to be. She had already followed the path once and helped the world become a little more honest, a little more just, because she had been brave enough to listen to her heart when it mattered most. Time had passed, but the story had not loosened its grip on Maya's heart. Though the world outside slowly returned to its rhythms, school bells, bike rides, homework, laughter, something inside her had changed. It wasn't sadness exactly, though that still came in quiet waves. It was something more profound, something that made her look at people differently, at silence differently, at truth differently. In the weeks since she had followed a butterfly into the woods and found baby Jacob, Maya had learned more about the world than most children her age ever did. She had learned that adults can lie, that systems can fail, and that sometimes even good people do things that leave scars behind. But she had also learned that courage doesn't always look like a superhero. It can look like a child with shaking hands, choosing not to walk away. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the pine trees and cast long golden streaks across the porch, Maya sat beside her grandmother, swinging gently back and forth on the creaky wooden bench that had carried so many of their conversations. The glass butterfly Detective Pearson had given her sat on the windowsill behind them, catching the light, painting soft rainbows across the floor. They didn't speak much at first. Some silences feel sacred, but after a while, Maya spoke. "Grandma, do you believe in signs? Like something or someone helping you, even if you don't see them?" Her grandmother paused before answering. "I believe," she said, "that the world speaks to us in quiet ways. If we listen close enough, we'll hear it." Maya nodded, her eyes scanning the yard. A real butterfly, yellow with black spots, fluttered lazily past the porch railing. Nothing about it was strange or magical. It moved like any butterfly might, drifting from flower to flower with no particular destination. And yet, it still made her heart ache just a little, because now she knew. The butterfly she had followed that day hadn't been real. Miss Winters had confessed that it was a tiny drone, designed to look like a butterfly. A clever trick, used to lead her into the woods. Patricia Coleman's son, a college engineering student, had helped build it. It had worked perfectly. Maya had followed it, believing it was nature, believing it was fate. But it hadn't been magic. It had been man-made manipulation. And yet, even knowing that, something inside her refused to believe the moment had been entirely artificial. Because even if the butterfly had been controlled, her heart had not. She had chosen to follow it. She had chosen to keep going. She had chosen to pick up the baby, to carry him, to protect him, and to tell the truth even when that truth hurt. Maybe Miss Winters had designed the path, but Maya had walked it. And that made all the difference. She often thought of Miss Winters now, not as the teacher who vanished or the woman in handcuffs, but as a person caught in the unbearable space between grief and justice. Someone who had been wronged, yes, but also someone who had made wrong choices. And yet, even through all of that, she loved her baby. No one could question that. Sometimes Maya imagined what it must have felt like, to hold your child again after being told he was gone, to realize he was alive, but not yours anymore. That kind of love doesn't erase wrongdoing, but it does demand compassion. The Millers had continued to share custody of Jacob under court supervision. Though the arrangement was unconventional, both families were trying. There were visits, counselors, shared calendars, and hard conversations. But there was also something else, love. And Maya could see it in both directions. She had seen the way Elaine Miller cried when she thought Jacob would be taken forever. And she had seen the way Amber Winters trembled with joy just holding his tiny hand. Love wasn't neat, it wasn't perfect, and it definitely didn't follow rules. But it was real. As she sat on that porch, Maya realized that sometimes the world didn't need to be sorted into right and wrong. Sometimes it was about listening to the quiet, trusting your instincts, and doing what you could in the moment. She hadn't solved everything, she hadn't undone the pain, but she had helped bring truth into the light. She had reminded adults, hardened by years in politics and pride, what it meant to simply care. The story hadn't just changed other people, it had changed her. She no longer looked at the world like a child who was waiting to be protected. She saw herself as someone who could act, someone who had a voice, someone who had already made a difference. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most powerful thing of all. As the sun dipped lower and the breeze carried the scent of pine and springtime, Maya looked again at the glass butterfly on the windowsill. Next to it, the real one landed, just for a moment, before taking off into the sky. Two butterflies. One fragile, created by human hands. The other fleeting, born from nature. Both beautiful, both reminders that even in the darkest woods, a small act of courage can guide the way. Life doesn't always give us clear heroes or villains. Sometimes it gives us broken people trying to do the right thing in the wrong way. Maya's story reminds us that truth isn't always simple. A child followed what she believed was a butterfly, and instead uncovered layers of pain, deception, and ultimately, love. Along the way, she showed us something powerful. You don't have to be old to be wise, or strong to be brave. Sometimes doing what's right is simply choosing to care when others look away. We live in a world where people often judge quickly, where mistakes define people more than their intentions. But this story asks us to pause, to consider the mother whose baby was stolen and the family who loved a child that wasn't biologically theirs. It asks us to open our hearts, not just our eyes. The real message? Compassion and truth must walk together. Without truth, love gets manipulated. Without compassion, justice becomes punishment, not healing. In our own lives, we may never face something as dramatic as Maya did, but we will all face moments where we can choose to speak up, to listen deeper, or to simply do what's right even when it's inconvenient. And those choices matter, because sometimes one small act, one voice, one decision, one brave child can begin to untangle even the most broken systems. And in that, there is hope. Let Maya's story remind us, the world doesn't change through power. It changes through courage, kindness, and the willingness to follow our hearts, even into the dark.